In this video you'll find out how to analyze MTT hand in a simple preflop. So here we are at the final table, 5 players left, we get a raise from this guy Amazam, and we want to know how to defend correctly against this raise, assuming that this guy is raising about 20-25% of hands in this position. Now we open simple preflop, and first of all we want to build a game tree. We fill in stack sizes without all these zeros. For example, Amaze at the start of the hand had about 523k, so we only type in 523. Then cutoff 201, button 183, a small blind 484, and 555 for us on the big blind. Blinds are 6 and 12 with ante of 1.5. I really like this type of syntax because we don't have to work with all those millions and we never get confused with all these huge numbers. Now we build the tree, and with a simple hand like this where one guy opens and we have to decide what to do on the big blind, I always construct the game tree myself for two reasons. First of all, it's faster, and second of all, I can optimize the tree this way so it wouldn't take too much RAM, which would again lead to faster calculations. So for both players I use all-in sizings on preflop, and then I will adjust it manually. By the way, with the last update we can now use 3 sizings for each street. Beforehand it was only 2, so I used 2 sizings, one small, one big. For example, one sizing would be like 35% of the pot, and the second sizing is full pot. But now, since we have 3, let's use all of them. 1/3 of a pot, 2/3 of a pot, and full pot for flop, turn, and river. This way solver can use small sizes, medium sizes, and large sizes. Then for the raising sizings, as a default, I always pick 50% of the pot, and I do it for every street. We don't check this delete donk bet checkbox because then the program will delete every donk bet on every street, and it's not so good for the solution. And we don't care too much about the rest of the settings. We will anyway build the tree manually. But for now, let's save this setup and call it all-in preflop. And we select this setup for every player at the table. Now we apply all of it and wait for program to build the tree. And now, since we know that the very first player at the table open raised, we're gonna create this branch for open raising for him and delete all the others. To create a branch we need to click on previous decision. Here is just the top of the branch, and click add node. And here we just choose the raise size. And here it is, the branch that we are interested in, so the other branches we are going to delete. We also assume that our opponent open raises about 25% of hands, so we click here on his range and we pick the hands we want. All suited aces, pocket pairs, Broadway hands, some mid offsuit aces, and some pretty hands, something like that. Next, we know that everyone folded to us, so we delete all the branches except for fold, for every player except big blind. We also know that if all of them folded, they did not have a great hand. So we can immediately assume that they didn't have any good pocket pair, up to 7s, for example. They didn't have any decent suited ace or any suited Broadway or a decent offsuit hand. And let's save this range and name it folds. Now we apply this range for every player who folded preflop. We don't have to be very precise with the folding range. We only need to get in the ballpark to not mess with the blockers. Because if everyone folds, then the probability of an ace, for example, hitting on the flop is slightly higher. Okay, now we get to hero, big blind, we face with the raise of 36k, we have 3 options, call, fold and shove, but we can also raise small, so let's add this option manually. To do so, we click on the previous action, which is a small blind fold, and again click add node. And in terms of sizing, let's pick 120. If we 3-bet to 120, our opponent can call, fold, or shove. It is totally fine with me, but if you want to, you can add a small 4-bet. Okay, this is our final game tree, and all we have to do now is click calculate. By the way, the solver doesn't work with specific combos post-flop. Instead, it works with different categories or groups of hands based on equity. And this first parameter determines the number of groups by which the hands will be distributed. In this case, it is set to 30 different groups or categories with 4 subgroups. And this is what solver will work with on the post-flop to easy its life a little bit. The more groups we have, the more accurate solution is, but the less group we have, the faster the calculations are. Anyway, we can change this parameter for every street to manipulate the accuracy of the calculations and its speed. Next parameter is textures, and we have perfect small. This parameter determines the amount of boards analyzed. And we really need a lot of flops, but not so much turns and rivers. The thing is that many turn and river cards are quite similar, and increasing the number of turn and river cards wouldn't help so much with the accuracy of the solution. Next algorithm, we have ESCFR. We shouldn't change it, just skip it. Threads basically determines the CPU usage, so either max it or make it like max -1. So you can browse while it's calculating. Iterations is basically the number of times program will deal cards for every player and analyze this hand. So if we put 1, it means that the program will deal cards 1 million times and determine the most profitable lines based on those million hands. How many iterations we should pick for every spot? Well, it's an open question. Because different spots need a different amount of iterations. For example, a simple tree would require less iterations than a very complex one. But the rule of thumb is the simpler the spot, the less iterations we need. But of course, ideally we want the program to calculate until the results doesn't change anymore. Let me show you what I mean. We pick 20,000 million iterations, which requires 1.2 gigabytes RAM, and we have that much, that's for sure. Then a save strategy after. This parameter basically determines how soon program will show us results. And I always set 1% to see the strategy as soon as possible, because if we have some mistakes in the tree, we can quickly fix it, not losing much time. Save strategy every is how often we want the program to save the results. If I set 5%, then every 1000 million iterations, the program will save this in-between result. We need this for a couple of reasons. First of all, as a backup. For example, if you're analyzing some very complex spot that requires 2 weeks of calculations, you will have this backup every 5% of the way, in case of like server crash. And second of all, these in-between results help us to determine if the strategy is still changing and how deep we have to calculate this spot. And we can calculate it in GPV, ICM, or with rake if we're playing cash, but we're playing tournaments, so we need to determine the payouts. In this tournament it was like 33.78 for the first, 19.94 for the second, 14.26 third, 10.94 fourth, and 870 fifths. Okay, let's start the calculations. Okay, now the calculation is complete, and I've put here 2 in-between results after 1000 million iterations and 4000, and the end result after 20,000 million iterations. We see that all these strategies are a little bit different, and the deeper we go into calculations, the wider we play. In the end, we play all the suited gappers, and some of them we use as a bluff 3-bet. Because those are the borderline hands of our defending range. So if we want to get quite a precise solution, we need to go through 20,000 million iterations for the game tree of this kind. But if we only need to get an idea of what's going on, and we want to create our own strategy based on this general idea, then 4,000 million iterations will be enough. And if you're going to work with this software regularly, I recommend you to sometimes test different trees by picking the maximum amount of iterations to find out after how many iterations the strategy is not changing anymore for this type of game tree, and how many iterations will be sufficient. And that's it. If you like the video, please subscribe and wait for the next one. Goodbye.